All right, guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Charlie McGrath, joined now by my friend, lawyer, Ellen, sorry, author. And I just found out today, and I don't even know where I read this, Ellen. I must have been on one of your, on Web of Debt or something. I was reading a profile on, where did I, oh, you know what? It's on the article you sent me. It's on the article, at the end of the article. It says Ellen Brown in your history, and you're a lawyer. So that's great. Ellen Brown, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Obviously, you know, I sent you a message today, and I sent you one yesterday. I interrupted you while you were multitasking, and I messaged Ellen and said, OMG, OMG, Cyprus, it is on, or something along those lines. And she goes, yep.
They did it.
They did it. Listen,
they did it, and they've been planning it a long time.
No doubt about it. And, you know, and some people are getting sick of hearing it, as was evident earlier this evening. But I've been talking every night to some extent about this event and how pivotal it is and how critical it is and how it sets a precedent and how things just got extremely interesting, if not to say dangerous, on planet Earth, at least with our financial system. You wrote an article today, said it could happen here. The confiscation scheme planned for the U.S. and the U.K. Let's get into it. We got an hour.
Okay, so what I was writing about was that this is not just a one-off, sort of an emergency arrangement for this little tiny island. There are plans that go back to, apparently back to 1997 with the Asian crisis, where in 2009 they set up the Financial Stability Board, which is the G20 Financial Stability Board, and it is the global regulator for banks, and they actually get to set the rules, and the banks have to follow. So there is a directive dated December 2012, put out jointly by the FDIC and the Bank of England, which is an advisory about what to do in the event where the government is no longer willing to bail out the bank, and it's some very large bank that it would be critical to keep this bank running. And so this directive says the thing to do in that event would be to, it's called a bail-in as opposed to a bailout. So you have the people directly connected to the bank would pay first, including the unsecured creditors. Now, they never identify, in this whole 16-page paper, they never identify the unsecured creditors as the depositors, but that's what they are. Legally, depositors are unsecured creditors. As soon as you put your money in the bank, it belongs to the bank, and they've got your money, and you've got an IOU, and they owe you that money. And I don't know why you're called unsecured. It seems to me if you put $100 in the bank, you just put up $100 security, but for some reason they call that, I think they call it unsecured because they just got rid of it. I mean, they don't have it. They lent it out somewhere, so they don't have the security, so it's unsecured in that sense. So, and this document says nothing. It's the FDIC putting it out, and it says nothing about insured deposits, meaning the $250,000 that we thought were protected, up to $250,000. So nothing's protected. They're going to take them all, or they're going to come after everybody. And that was the precedent that was set in Cyprus, where initially they tried to go for the insured depositors as well as the uninsured depositors. It finally wound up with just the uninsured, but it was like a shot across the bow. We're thinking about this. This is in the plan. We wouldn't stoop to not doing it. And they will do it here, and they're planning to do it here. And what will trigger it is a big collapse at J.P. Morgan or Bank of America, which have these huge derivatives departments, which are merged with their depository arms, so they can go right for it.
Yeah, and in fact, not to catch up, but in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it J.P. Morgan moved a bunch of derivative exposure that it had in its Merrill unit, newly acquired Merrill unit, to the J.P. Morgan side because ended up...
That was Bank of America, but yeah, they did.
Oh. Okay, yeah, so they would have exposure. That exposure would be backed by government at that point.
Yeah, the exposure is backed by the depositors, right? And so the presumption is that the depositors will be bailed out by the government. But now in Dodd-Frank, they're saying no more. We're not going to bail out a big derivatives collapse. So who's going to do it? They're going to go right for the deposits, and they can do it because they've got your deposits. I mean, they've got it right there in their vaults. Your money is in their vaults, and if they say we can do it, and here's the law, a directive coming down from the Bank for International Settlements, that not much we can do about it.
Yeah, and I want to break all this down, and let's look at Cyprus, right? Let's look at how it went the way it did. I want to talk about FDIC. Is our money safe? Is this $250,000 guarantee safe? Because it seems in Cyprus they're doing the €100,000, 85,000 pound insurance. That if your accounts are beneath that insurance amount, that it's just going to get transferred to the largest bank in Cyprus, and the Laiki Bank, if I'm saying that right, Laiki Bank is just going to be a bad bank. It's going to no longer exist. Again, we see upward integration, one bank to a bigger bank. But this is critical. This is important because this is the template. And I agree with you. The first thing they tried to do was say everybody's going to pay 6 to 10%, and then it's so reminiscent. It's so much a repeat of what we saw in 2008 when the bank said we need $700 billion, and if we don't get it, it's all coming apart. And government at that time, our Congress said no. And then an extraordinary event occurred. We had crisis and pandemonium. We still see these little micro events that look just like it all over the world. The people of Cyprus said, to hell with that. You're not taking 60%, at least the parliament did. And it was instantaneous. They had a backup plan, which circumvented representative government altogether. So tell me about the insurance on the deposits. Do we have, because first of all, I don't think it's going to stop with actual money you have in a bank. I think if you're sitting with a 401k or any other kind of retirement, those are assets that they're going to go after in an emergency. But let's talk about, we got 2 minutes up for the break. Let's talk about the insurance aspect of the people as far as in Cyprus and the 100,000, and could that be thrown out the window there as well as here?
Well, they called it a tax or a what was the word they used?
A haircut.
Anyway, yeah, there's another word, but a levy. They called it a levy on these deposits too. So it's a euphemism. But if you can tax an insured deposit, what good is the insurance? They're just taking a percentage of your deposit. And what it seems to me is it's worse than a tax, because a tax actually goes on everybody's money. The rich as well as the poor. I mean, at least it covers everybody. But in this case, the tax is going to be on the particular depositors of a particular bank, and the insured depositors are the ones who, or the people with just their life savings in the bank. Those are your ordinary people, your middle class, your lower class. That's all they've got, and they keep it in the bank. People who have a lot of money put it in the stock market or in derivatives or various places, other places, hard assets of various sorts, real estate. So they're not going to lose. The burden of this cut is going to be on the poor and middle class.
No doubt about it. And I guess, one thing that's a little bit bewildering to me is the $100,000 tab they're putting. If you're under that, they're just going to shuffle it to that bigger bank. The effect that it has on some countries, because that Laiki Bank, am I saying that right? Laiki, Laiki, a Cyprus-based bank, 80% of their deposits are Russian companies or Russian individuals, and they're about to take a black eye. Now, there's some people that think that money's been flowing out of the country before now, or before this plan will be imposed. But it's a complete different bailout than what we've seen in Europe so far. Very, very convoluted and very scary, Ellen.
Right, and I think they picked that particular place because nobody was going to be sympathetic. So that everybody says, well, the oligarchs, they deserved it. And now they're going to use that model for the rest that you will be sympathetic for. All
right, we're going to be right back with Ellen Brown and more Wide Awake News Radio. Please hang tight. All right, guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Ellen and I continued the conversation during the break a little bit, and I'm going to, and I implored upon her to we were talking about the ESM. I talked about the ESM in a video I did just the other day that she commented on. Look, I don't know. I don't know how to make it completely understandable, or this vision that I see happening. I don't know how to make it, not only believable but understandable, that this is what we've been talking about for years, especially since 2007, 2008. That everything that is being done behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, behind the scenes, they're writing legislation, passing laws to ensure that these institutions cannot fail. And in front of the scenes, they're throwing more and more debt onto the people like it's candy, and it feels like recovery, but it's not. It's smothering us. And when this all comes crashing down, guess what? We own it. We own it. They're gonna dump this onto the people of the world, and it's going to be a burden that nobody, no nation can bear. And Ellen, I'm really adamant with this Cyprus deal because I do believe that it's something new. And I said during the break, when the phrase "bail in" is something we're going to be hearing a lot more of. Do you see this as a trigger event like I do, or am I too far?
I do. Well, I think they've planned it a long time, and this is the test case. And now that they've done it once, well, now the New Zealand there's a New Zealand plan of the same sort, and the finance minister is pushing it and saying that this is what will happen in New Zealand. Is they'll do exactly what they did in Cyprus, and in New Zealand they don't have deposit insurance. And I've read elsewhere that deposit insurance is a bad idea because it makes banks be lax in their dealings because they figure the government will step in. So the bank should take care of itself. But that means the depositors, and nobody ever told us as depositors that we were creditors of the bank. It's as if the real creditors, the ones that should be hit, the ones that are making 5% or whatever, or 30% of its grease, they actually knew that they were investing money. Obviously, they wouldn't have done it if they didn't have some extra money to invest. But your ordinary depositor, his deposits are there for his rent. He puts money in the bank to write checks on it.
You said a word that is critical. One word says it all. Investor, right? If the people listening to us right now, I'm going to assume that when they go to the bank and put their money in there, they're not thinking, look at this big investment that I'm scoring here with my 0.0002% interest I get annually on my checking account. These people, we are not investors. We put our money in the bank so we don't have to shove it in a mattress, so it doesn't get stolen from us. But that's exactly what's happening, and it's beyond ludicrous to me. And Ellen, there's going to be bloodshed over this. And I'm not condoning anything, obviously, but
I think that's why they've got the FEMA camps set up, and that there's all this confiscating the gun or getting rid of the guns, etc. I think that's what they're expecting. They know the only way they're going to be able to pull this off is by imposing martial law, and to pull that off, they've got to have all their ducks in a row.
Well, and you know what? Lawyer Ellen Brown just said FEMA camp, so it's official.
I only know what I read.
Well, I only believe half what I read, unless it comes from you. Then I believe 100% of it. All right. So we have investors, we have depositors, and in the old days of Glass-Steagall, never the twain shall meet, but that isn't the case anymore. And man, I really just feel that humanity in the West, anyway, at least that enjoys the pleasures, and this is all tongue in cheek, of course, of a central banking member. It's a big rope-a-dope, and we're about to catch it right on the chin.
The very idea that they're paying 0.002% or whatever on our deposits, that's so they can say, see, you got consideration. You actually made some in this deal. This was for good and valuable consideration that we took your money. When in fact, of course, we don't make anything, and everybody knows that.
Yeah, and in fact, the true filthy, disgusting truth of the matter is that you take your money and you put it into J.P. Morgan. They can turn around and park it at the Federal Reserve and make more money on your money than you can with them. I mean, it's incestuous.
Well, and now they're going to back it with their derivative schemes, which use it to back their derivative schemes, which they make huge money, but they can also lose huge money, which means they can lose our money. There's a difference between, in the Russian oligarchs, for example, that they actually do put their money in a bank, big bucks. They put their big money in a bank. But in the U.S., people with a lot of money just don't do that. I mean, typically, well, even you only keep as much in your checking account as you need to pay your bills. And then the rest you invest somewhere if you've got investment money. So it's the ordinary people who only have $5,000 that are going to really be hurt.
Air quote 5,000. All right, we're going to be back with Ellen Brown, and I want to talk a little bit about the oligarchs, and could this be a political play, a new world order political play? We're going to be back with Ellen Brown and more Wide Awake News Radio. Hang tight. Welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Gary, Ellen, and I were having a spirited debate during the break about, when this all was either winnable or got broke, and we went back to 1971, 1974, and you know what? It doesn't really. Here's the deal: it doesn't matter. It does matter where we're at now, and Gary made a point that we could back the dollar with anything. And we did go out the gold standard in 1971, and I agree with him on this. We could back it with, turtle shells, whatever, as long as it was we, the people, issuing that money and determining the value of it. I'm cool. I don't care what it's backed by. But that isn't the case. We have this fiat currency that's backed by our future, our financial future. And I was trying to pose a question to you, Ellen, that, how much longer, how much longer we have? You said to me in the break that they could kick this, they could keep playing this game, keep pumping up the stock market, keep this hope-optimism going. But when Cyprus occurred, I saw this as almost the power elite, the New World Order, deciding, okay, it's time to light a fuse, a short fuse, because regardless of how much hope-optimism you put on that television, or how many lies you put on the internet, or how many statements Joran Dissenblum comes out and says how this is going to be the model, but oh wait, the next day he says it's not. No matter how much you try to hide the reality, you're stealing people's money. So when these bank opens, these Cyprus banks open now in about 4 hours. People, they could give a rat's hiney now as far as what the propaganda says about everything's going to be okay. It's the rubber on the road. It's the knock on the door. It's the sledgehammer reality. I don't know how many more puns I can come up with, but I mean, this is it. And it's almost, in my opinion, the trip, right? The trigger on the trap to get a bank run, to get people pissed, to get people killing each other, to get people mad, and to get them into the streets. And what better way? What guaranteed only way? The best weapon ever created: steal their money and just sit back and watch what happens. If I'm in Italy, if I'm in Spain, if I'm anywhere in Europe, if I'm in Russia, with billions of dollars in these European banks, I'm out. I'm out, and that immediately, instantaneously brings on collapse.
Yeah, agreed. Well, and they could easily have saved Cyprus. It wasn't that much money. They could have just done, the ECB could have stepped up just like the Federal Reserve did for our banks and said, here, we'll lend you the money at 0.25%, pay it back when you can, which is the Federal Reserve did that to the tune of $26 trillion. Yeah. It didn't hurt anything. Nobody even knew they did it. I mean, really what it was just an overdraft on their account. They could have done that for those banks, but no, they insisted on getting money up front to make them another loan. So these banks had to go down. It was like they were chosen to go down. They were the chosen, just like Lehman Brothers. This is the Lehman Brothers moment where they bailed out the banks up till now, and now they've said, no, you're on your own. Take it from your own depositors. That's
a great point. The Lehman moment, and you're right. It's point. The bailout is tantamount to zero. It's the same interest rate you get in a bank. It is on your checking account, 0.02% of European GDP, $10 billion, less money than Goldman Sachs received through backdoor bailouts during the 2008 collapse. So the dollar amount is trivial, but the carnage that can come out of it isn't trivial.
Right. Yeah, so I think it is sort of they're just setting themselves up for the next big move where they won't be going against oligarchs, they'll be going against some normal bank. And then JP Morgan will fail, or Bank of America. It is this huge pyramid scheme, and they're at the end of the pyramid scheme where the only way they can possibly sustain it, they can't keep feeding this debt monster, because you're always having to pay back twice what the banks give you. If you count the whole 30-year loan, you're going to pay back twice what they paid you. So where's that money going to come from? Somebody has to take out more debt, and somebody else. And they've already sucked up all the possible debtors, pretty much. They're back on. At first, they hit up the third world and impoverished them, and then they came back on us with our housing market and our housing. But there's nobody else to hit, so they have to come up with another plan, which is, I mean, at first they hit up the taxpayers, and now they're going to hit up the depositors themselves.
Well, and it isn't that, and I agree with you, but it isn't that they had to come up with a plan. I think like you said earlier, this is part of the plan. It's
part of the plan, yeah.
It's just this move into this phase. As far as a geopolitical assessment of this, these Russian companies and individuals. Do you put any credence to that warning from Europe, warning from the Troika? I can't say it. The EU
Troika.
Troika. Yeah, I could say Dissenblom, but I can't say Troika. But how about the ECB, the EU, and the ESM? That group is this a shot across the bow at Russia?
Well, and that group is unelected. That people say, oh, it was the government, but it wasn't the government. The government actually tried to stop it. The government said, no way.
They did stop it.
They stopped it first. Yeah, and then, like you say, it was just like our $700 billion, and then they tried to say no, and then they wound up doing it anyway. But it seems to me for Russia, those are their tax dodgers, so that's probably why they didn't bail them out. I mean, if they were their ordinary savers, they might have, but think about our tax haven for people who are hiding their money and not paying the U.S. government. Why would the U.S. government be particularly sympathetic to bailing those banks out?
No, our U.S. government goes a long way into keeping in place these tax havens and these offshore havens that giant corporations get to use. Yeah. These corporations that we speak of, they spend a lot of money to ensure that these havens stay in place. But, again, if it was a message to the Russian oligarchs or to, the so-called tax dodgers, and first of all, who they dodging taxes from Russia or from the EU? I mean, if they're putting money into their here's the deal. These banks in Cyprus decided that they were going to get into a lot of products, financial instruments, and they were giving better interest rates than the next guy. So this is assumingly why so much money had flowed into these institutions. But the people, the million people that live on that island, they're not the ones that are the cause of the problem. It's the banks themselves, and to some extent, corrupt government that facilitated these kind of risky schemes that are causing banks all around the world to feel this strain. But the least responsible and coincidentally the least powerful, and also coincidentally the ones who are about to take it, if you will, are the people, and that is the last goal, that is the last part of the plan. Put the burden on the people. Watch the what hit the fan. Sweep in with 2 billion rounds of hollow point ammunition, 2,700 up armored vehicles, FEMA camps, the whole 9 yards. This is playing out beautifully if this is their plan, and it's coincidentally if it's not.
What interests me is what we can do about it. It seems to me, particularly if you think of it's one thing for your small investors, but all the states, U.S. states, and the cities, the banks are big enough to hold their revenues, the local banks, so they put their money in Wall Street, and they invest in Wall Street. So they are totally vulnerable, and they are the big players. They've got a lot of money at risk in Wall Street. And if there's a big derivatives bust, I mean, look what happened to the California pension funds. They lost 30% one year after 2008. So that could happen again to the local government's revenues. So it seems to me that it would behoove them to set up their own bank, set up a public system.
When we come back, our last segment of tonight's program, let's talk public banking solutions, what we can do on the backside of imminent collapse. We'll be back with Ellen Brown and more Wide Awake News Radio. Hang tight. All right, guys, we are back. Final segment of this hour. After the program tonight, I am going to join James Corbett on the Corbett Report. I'm not sure if that's live or if he records that and puts it up. So you know what? I may be making this announcement for nothing. I'll ask him and then put a message in. I'm going to be on his program for a half hour. And he is, as Gary told us during the break, there's questions in the chat about Bitcoin, and he really is quite knowledgeable on it. He's educated me on it quite a bit. Ellen, your take, your thoughts on Bitcoin? It seems to be all the rage right now. I told you during the break that the notion of a competitive currency I kind of like. I actually don't kind of, I really like. But the scarcity aspect of it, scarcity inevitably leads, in my opinion, to manipulation and to tyranny. Your thoughts on Bitcoin?
Well, and I've also read that there are private exchanges. There's one big exchange that I think does 80% of the trades. And if that exchange decided to go out of business, I mean, you're totally dependent on that. And if you put a whole bunch of money in, you could lose all your money. I mean, it seems to me as vulnerable as J.P. Morgan. It doesn't have the government behind it, which theoretically, at least, the government's looking at J.P. Morgan and keeping an eye on it. So it looks risky to me, but I like the concept of having an electronic money that's totally. One thing it seems to me that it's missing is that it's good to have an exchange of, you can exchange goods and services, but how do you do the sort of credit that where companies have credit lines and they have to pay their workers before they have a product to sell, which is the sort of credit that actually runs the country. I don't think you could do that with a basic sort of barter like Bitcoin exchange.
What do you think of the concept of competing modes of commerce, like competing currencies, state to state? And Gary had brought up that Virginia is talking about something like that. We know Utah has passed legislation for the use of precious metals, gold and silver, in certain respects to use as a means of exchange. I mean, are you constitutionalist on this, where you want to see Article 1, Section 8, government or Congress determine the value of money, and that is it, period? Which I guess who cares as long as it's we the people and not corrupt corporations or corrupt government that is giving away the power to create money to private institutions. The notion of multiple mediums of exchange seems to be almost self-governing, because if you have somebody who does a Federal Reserve number on their means of exchange, be it the wampum, and they decide to print it to infinity, well, then it just becomes worthless in a pool of other mediums of exchange.
Well, the problem with competing currencies is that we've done it before. In the 19th century, banks issued their own banknotes, and they had the name of the bank on them, and they all had different values. They got more valuable the closer you got to the bank, because nobody knew what the thing was going to be worth by the time you got to the bank. And they actually had catalogs where you could look up and see what the worth of the thing was today. Well, imagine it. I mean, even take simple silver and gold. If you use silver and gold coins and you use them both, your choices are to go with the market value of gold, which is going to rise and fall daily, and the value of silver is going to rise and fall differently than gold. So they're going to be valued differently against each other. So when you go to the supermarket, your grocer is going to have to look and see what the value of gold is today and whether they want to accept it. I mean, you could buy stuff in gold now if you wanted to. It's just you can't get your grocer to accept it because he wants his price is $1 and he wants $1 and he's not sure that's what he's getting.
So it's all any exchange that we talk about now be it whatever, be it barter or gold or silver, it's always got to be converted into that unit, that dollar unit before, so truly it's a transaction in dollars. I mean, if it's gold and I want to buy a new car with it, then it's just converted to dollars and then it's used. So, give us some option then. I know you're big on community banks. Would a community bank like we see in North Dakota, a community bank that in that region would issue that government of the people of that state, would you be opposed, or do you think that could be an idea that worked where regions issued their own type of currency? That would be something that would be a little more, certainly more stable in comparing it to other, the Northwest versus the Southwest. And as far as getting farther away from the source, it's not the 1800s anymore. We certainly can find out instantaneously the value of the North Dakotan buck versus the value of the Montanan, dinero, whatever.
Well, I think we're fine with the dollar. It's actually pretty stable. What you need, I think you need a stable measurement of value. So the dollar or any currency should be just like a yardstick. You know what an inch is, and you know how an inch compares to a meter, and it's stable. Those relationships don't change. So a dollar is just what it should be, what it was during colonial American times, and what it was when they used the tally sticks. It was basically a receipt for goods and services. So the soldiers, this is how it originated in 1691 when the governor of Massachusetts didn't have any money to pay his soldiers. So he just issued these little receipts that showed value earned. You've worked for a month, so here's your pay for a month. And then they went out and spent that in the community, and the community acknowledged that these soldiers had done service for the community, so they were all happy to accept them. And what made them valuable is they were accepted in the payment of taxes. So they were basically an advance against the taxes that the governor would be owed later. And that's what the tally sticks were, too. Chris Cook did a really good article on this, that they were essentially that the king needed money also to fight a war or whatever. And so he would collect the taxes early and pay with these tally sticks, and then they would have a discount on them. So he'd actually pay more than the goods were worth. I mean, at that time they paid in goods. They paid in corn and wheat and cows or whatever they had, sheep, I suppose, in England. A lot of sheep, probably.
Yeah. Fish and chips they paid with.
I think that was later.
All right, so competing currency, you don't think it's necessary. How about just a return to a constitutional currency that is a unit of measure, whatever, it doesn't matter what we call it, but with no backing, fiat, just backed by the full faith of government. But
backed by goods and services. It represents a certain value. I heard a woman contacted me because she'd written a book and she wanted some help with the book. And her job was they have these global exchanges of goods that are all computerized, and it's all on the internet. And I forget what you get to start with, $100 or something. You get $100 credit when you join the thing. So then you go into this internet market of goods and services, and her job was to figure out what the values of those goods were. Like, she did one for lumber, and there were 70,000 lumber products. And so she could tell you exactly, what this little screw of this particular size was on the regular market. So you could go in there, figure out the value of your goods or the goods you're going to buy. And since everybody starts with $100, it's like a dividend or like a social credit, advance of credit. You go in there with your credit, you buy some stuff. And what happens is all these goods and services that are currently considered of no value, they're sitting on the shelves and nobody will buy them. They get sold. So there is a market for those things. What there isn't is the money to buy the stuff with. So if you start a credit system like that, where you just say, here's what I've got.
Is this a theory or is this in practice?
No, somewhere? They really do it. Yeah.
What is it? What's the name of it? That's interesting.
there are international trade associations of some sort. I can look it up.
No, you don't have to do it right. That's fine. You don't have to do it right now.
Later.
It sounds very interesting though. So, are they exchanging the services then, or the goods in this case?
They exchange goods, and it's all by internet. Now, one of the problems with a community currency is it's so small. Like, I'm in a community currency, and nobody ever asked me for my services. So you can't really, and there aren't any services that I really want. But if it's huge like that, if you've got 70,000 lumber products you can choose from, if it's global, then you will find the products you want, and you'll be happy to go in there and trade your products for whatever else is out there. And you don't have to trade with the exact person that has the products you want. You just put your products out there. Somebody buys them, you get some credit. So it's a big credit system. And that's what I think would work. A big public global credit system where you do advance credit, you don't advance credit against somebody else's money that you borrowed. You don't need to borrow the money first. If you're the government and you're doing a public credit system, you just advance the credit. All you do is you monetize the promise to pay of the borrower, which is what banks do now. But then they have to scramble around and pretend that they're borrowing it from this account or that account. And if that account doesn't, even though the person who owns the account thinks his money's still there. So those are the reserve, they have this whole complicated system to make it look like they're borrowing. They're just lending money of their depositors. And if they don't have it from the depositors, then they're lending money market money or the money of some other bank's depositors. But they don't need to do all that.
But it sure is beneficial to a very select few that they do it that way. And it has led to the conundrum that we face now, right?
Yeah, well, I think we need to push the reset button and start all over on our concept of what money is, do a new monetary system where we can take the good parts of banking. What banking did for Italy in the medieval times when they first came up with it was create a lot of extra credit to allow these merchants in their ships to go off with their wares and come back and then they could pay in gold and pay off the loan. So that was actually a brilliant system, but they were always getting in trouble because they were dealing in gold and there wasn't enough gold, and the bankers were pretending to be lending gold they didn't really have. I mean, they were shuffling it around in their books.
Oh, sounds just like now.
Like today, yeah. But the concept is good. The concept of advancing credit. If you had a public system where you just advance credit, it would actually work.
Ellen Brown, thank you very much. I appreciate your insight, your knowledge, and coming on here and breaking it down for us. We'll get you back on again soon. I'll keep in touch with you because I think we both believe this was a trigger event, this grab of depositor cash. All right, guys, enjoy Jeff Friends because he is coming up next. Tomorrow night, Eric Lovely, and I believe we have Gabe Elton. If it's not Gabe Elton, it's Greg Manarino, and that will be our guest tentative schedule for tomorrow night. All right, have a good night. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace.